reduced to get the layman, or to provide accessibility to laymen. Well, as a fan of Enlightenment, not the window manager, the historical period, I would rather say, wouldn't it be better in this particular case to see this from to try to change this from the people's side rather than from technology's side? I agree that certain technologies can be made more accessible, but I think once you deny there is complexity, and once you leave the people who use the technology out of the picture and just try to make technology accessible by dumbing it down, you probably lose quite a bit. And I think a fan of Enlightenment would have to say, well, let's educate the people. Let's educate the people. Let's change technology as well. Let's make it more transparent. Let's make it, Debian is more transparent than Windows maybe, because you can really see what's going on. That's a good thing. But let's resist the temptation to dumb technology down just to provide the illusion. And I think it would be an illusion of accessibility. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we're talking about the case of the introduction of technology into politics here, and and I think within politics we should try to maintain a certain simplicity, because only simplicity can really fully guarantee transparency and intelligibility for everyone, because otherwise not everyone will care about this complexity thing. And a good case in point is the voting computer. Why on earth would we abandon the system with just making a cross on a piece of paper and 3 people checking it? It's much more easy, it's very simple, and it's a political process which is very important and which can be disturbed very much by the introduction of a computer in there. So I would say that in general, I would just state that as a preference, if it is possible to have a simple thing rather than a complex thing, and if that isn't associated with any substantial loss of value or of whatever you want to achieve with that, then I would generally prefer the simple case over the complex one. And in the other case, of course, you're right. We should just maintain the complex thing and then enlighten people about the complexities in there, and try to maintain transparency as good as possible.
Choices determining technological development very often happen by political choices, which are not publicly debated, if not by business. One good instance of that would be spectrum and broadcasting technologies, because having chosen one type of regulation, basically one type of technology was chosen, which had certain incumbents behind it. So I think that in this day and age, a very important point would be to create an imperative of accountability by political structures when they make technological choices, because those are things that produce basically the dominant technological environment, and those are the points where public can, within a constituted political environment, so an ordinary or ordered political environment, intervene into technological choices which are being made, and they are not being made only for the sake of technology. And a second point is that those choices oftentimes happen indirect through means of optimization. I mean, voting machines were chosen primarily through this logic of optimization, and this also has to be increasingly accounted on. So I think that we should also strive towards a redefinition of how political structures or structures of political decision-making make technological choices, and make those things account, or points in the structure account for the choices they make. So particularly when it comes to optimization, I think that it's a strong argument which oftentimes does away with the political debate as to what technologies we choose or not.
Yeah, no, totally. I totally agree with this. Maybe I should make that as a sub point of this raise awareness thing as well, that politics should be aware, of course, of the values and needs which are being introduced, also by optimization, as you said, because optimization in itself has some certain values and then also is able to carry other values in there. And of course, it should be made more aware to the politicians that they are not only just optimizing a certain kind of process, but also gambling with values in these cases. So I totally agree with your point.
Okay, I'd like to ask about definitions of control, and the reason I want to ask about that is to question what you were saying about how the technologists are the kind of responsible agents for the counter-development. And I would look at like privacy-enhancing technologies, as in anonymizers or the Freenet, as also political technologies. I don't know if you see it as such. And in a way, these technologies are about avoiding processes of control by introducing other ways of control. So if you look at cryptography, or even, anonymizer itself, most PETs are actually control mechanisms. So I wonder if there's a positive and negative definition of control, I don't know. Or is there another way of defining security or abolishing security or deconstructing security, which as a technologist I cannot do. But I would expect, for example, somebody who's read lots of Foucault to be able to give me some feedback, which I haven't done. But I'm just wondering if you have different definitions of control and security, which would help technologists question mechanisms of control, or to produce technologies that do something else, that subvert or are counter-developments. I think without these ideas, it's difficult to develop technologies as well. So it's a cooperation.
Yeah, thank you for that remark. Actually, yeah, that's quite true. I mean, there would have to be some sort of proactive version of counter-development, because I formulated it very negatively here in a way to more trying to disturb and destruct certain developments and things. But of course, like these privacy things which are trying to put a certain type of control to control these other people who are trying to control something else, would have to be introduced there, which would be, of course, a case to an example for restoring physicality in this sense, to try to make your communication non-interceptable and to give you back the control. But I totally agree. Maybe I should make my argument more fine-grained there and add this as some sort of a proactive thing. But I don't know if we do need to, maybe my notion of control was somewhat negative. I didn't intend that. I should probably formulate that a little more neutral. Thank you.
I would like to add that I'm also in favor of reducing complexity in our stuff more than educating people. Of course, I'm always in favor of educating people and enlightening them. That's, of course, always a very good thing to do and also important thing. But one thing is, I believe that our technology has, and culture using it has advanced too far for the average person to be able to understand things. And it's just too big a demand that people are educated in a way that, for example, would them allow to understand the inner workings of a voting machine. And I mean, I'm not even able to educate myself as much as I would like to, and I think it's needed. So I think it's a very tough job to educate other people if you can't even do it to yourself enough. And I think there's a bit of a danger of abuse if you say that people should be educated, or if one demands that people should be educated about the high technology, because it could be said that, well, our technology is so complex, it has to be, you just have to understand it. And if you don't, then go educate yourself, and we will use it in the time being, and you don't have to understand it because we are the experts. And that is a danger, because this is a thing I think should just not be accepted. It has to be simple, and it has to be made simple, and if the technology is too complex inherently, then it cannot be used for these political means, like the voting computer, for example. Even if it would save lots of money and be fast and whatever, if it is inaccessible, and I think this is a case of full inaccessibility, because even the experts needed to to do very hard and long reverse engineering to get to know what really goes on. So nobody really can know in any normal or acceptable way. So this just has to be avoided, and if it's more expensive and slower to count all the votes by hand, which actually it doesn't seem to be, then we just have to accept that and do it, because it's well, they're just not that important as the understandability of the things by the people.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, that's really a thing I'm a lot in favor of. I mean, this one thing about enlightening the people. I've tried to. I'm still on it, trying to do a project within the Chaos Computer Club, which aims at precisely providing understanding and precise manuals for the public on how these things understand, to provide these translations. And the idea I had for that was to give like two different versions. Like the one version would just be very coarse and very easy understandable. Like if you use this technology, then this and this crap could happen. Because of this and these certain things in a very broad and coarse functional language, and then also to provide the more detailed account of what could happen for anybody who is interested, in fact, to get into the details more narrowly. So that would just be a matter of procedure and within counter development, how you could actually just provide different versions of these things to make it still maintain it as interesting for the public. And then another thing which you have addressed was that there might be abuse of this, and I'm fully aware of the potential of abuse once you give countermeasures to the public, that there will always be some guy who is making full use of that just because he was pissed off with some bureaucrat or something. But I think that is a very nice thing, actually, because it renders the introduction of technology into politics quite impossible and quite dangerous for the politicians, and so they will think thrice about doing it. That's just my point.
Okay, we have time for another question, I guess.
It's just a small question. The most surprising thing for me was the physical accessibility of the technology. In the case of the voting computer, it's quite easy to see that there is a thing that you can access and you can beat upon it. But if we think about data retention or things like that, it's not only the technology but also the data that isn't physically accessible. And are there concepts to relate the technology and the data that's been gathered with the technology or stored by technology on the one hand, and the other hand, how do I have to imagine physical accessibility in those cases?
Yeah, I don't know how to really formulate the connection between technology and data, because I'm not a technologist. I'm a meta-technologist, but not really a hacker. I do not know anything about these things in any greater detail. I could tell you some nice philosophical theories about it later, but yeah, I mean, what we really need is to this sort of physical accessibility. I mean, another term to phrase this would be sabotage. To simply, what we have to do is to provide sabotage devices for any sort of procedures or processes which are potentially politically biased or which have a tendency to lean themselves to bad dystopian political scenarios. So that, I mean, that's like the core idea I have in my subversive mind in the back, to really, and that would be like also as you said, to have a proactive thing of this in mind as well, not just to disturb certain things or to avoid or to refrain from using communication because it can be intercepted, but also to sabotage your opponent by a number of different means.
Yeah, maybe a comment. We should, in a way, I think we should try to live with the fact that we already, since so long time, we delegated part of our lives to experts. So technology is just another field, but since so many years, we delegated our health to doctors. We trust them in a way. The fact that maybe the fact that they are enough there have enough doctors on the market, and they not always agree one which